It's a story that most people around here know, old yet ever-changing, ever-growing. It's a story about hard work and the gap.
During the sign-in ride event at Sam Galloway Ford, pay $0 down, $0 during signing, and $0 first month payment. Plus, you pay $0 for maintenance throughout the entire lease term. Test drive today for your chance to win $5,000 at Sam Galloway Ford.
From NBC News in Washington, the
Becky
world's longest running
Ford,
television
JeffAtJess.com,
program.
commentary
This is
with
Meet the Press
Jeff.
with David
JeffAtJess.com, J-EFFS.com, live video.
It's the battle over the nomination of Chuck Hagel for Defense Secretary. It's now been delayed for another week, that vote, and the $85 billion of automatic spending cuts, which are scheduled to take effect in 2 weeks' time if no agreement is reached. We've got it all covered this morning, and we want to start with the view from the White House. In Washington, the job of the White House Chief of Staff is known as the most powerful post in town. And there's a new man occupying that seat of power, and he is here with us this morning on Meet the Press, his first appearance. But who is he? How did he get here? Well, Dennis McDonough grew up one of 11 kids, qualification enough, in a small town in Minnesota. He was a high school football star. He cut his teeth in politics working in the House for Congressman Lee Hamilton and in the Senate for Majority Leader Tom Daschle and later for Barack Obama. When the freshman senator decided to make a run for the White House in 2008, he tapped McDonough to be his foreign policy advisor for the campaign. And once president, Obama appointed him to the National Security Council and later made him his deputy national security advisor. As the president noted when he announced him as his pick to replace Jack Lew, McDonough has been involved in every major foreign policy decision, including the call to get Osama bin Laden.
Actually begun to think that Dennis likes pulling all-nighters. The truth is, nobody outworks Dennis McDonough.
And here he is. Mr. McDonough, welcome to Meet the Press.
Thanks so much for having me, David.
This is a tough job. You're the fourth one to have it. What is the key part of your goal for this job? Is the president has a narrow window? How do you approach it?
Well, my approach is, I think, to focus on something that Jim Baker told me just the other day, actually. I reached out to several of the other chiefs of staff in the past, and he said, as long as you're focused on the of staff and not on chief, you're going to be okay. And I got to tell you, I'm working with a staff that is excellent, and I'm really honored to be part of it. I'm really honored that the president's laid this responsibility on me, and I just look forward to doing it.
From the expected to the unexpected, I was just mentioning before we went on the air, this meteor that hit near Russia, the asteroid that came near the United States, this is stuff you got to talk about and deal with, don't you, in the job?
It is stuff that we have to talk about and that we do talk about, and I've had a lot of backs and forth with our science advisor, John Holdren, about this over the last several days. But you know what? The fact is that we're going to keep working on this and everything else to make sure that we're on top of it.
All right, let's talk about some of these agenda items. First of all, Chuck Hagel's nomination. This is being held up. The expectation is he'll ultimately be confirmed. But Bill Cohen, former defense secretary, said something this week to Politico that caught my attention that really does underline the problems that Hagel could have as defense secretary. He says it's going to put him in a difficult position once he gets there. Those resentments will weigh around. I think it's tragic what's happening, and I think it's shameful. If he's confirmed, is he a weaker defense secretary, and is that something that weighs on the president's mind?
No, he's not going to be a weaker defense secretary. He's going to be a great defense secretary. This is a guy who volunteered to go to Vietnam. Heavily decorated when he was there.
I'm David Gregory with our Meet the Press.
In everything since. He's had the last 4 years as the president's chairman of the President's Intelligence Advisory Board in the Senate, where he's a leading Republican senator. He's always done the hard stuff and made it look easy, frankly, and that's exactly what.
But the hard stuff, like cutting the defense budget, how's he going to work with Republicans? John McCain, who will be coming up in a couple of minutes, said, "Look, frankly, Republicans don't like him. It's personal."
You know, I actually had an opportunity over the last several days to talk to Senator McCain about this, and I think you've seen this reflected in the press. Several of the Republicans themselves are uncomfortable with how this has played out, and that's why I think Senator McCain and others have already said that they intend to vote to end this filibuster as soon as they get back from the recess. So I think Senator McCain and others know that we all have to work together to get this thing done, because when it comes to national defense, national security, that at least has to be above politics. I hate to see this being played politics with here in Washington.
Is there anything else in some of the speeches that were not disclosed, that are not being reviewed by some Republicans? Anything in there that hurts his reputation, his views about Israel, anything?
No.
Nothing to worry about at all.
No.
What about Benghazi and the attack? One of the things, as I've talked to Republican senators, they wanted to get additional information about what the president did the night of the attack, some of the advice that he was given, the talking points and whatnot. Has the president finished on the Benghazi matter? Is there anything else he's going to say or anything else he's concluded that should have been done that was not done?
You know, just the other day, our council sent a very extensive letter to Capitol Hill in response to a series of questions on Benghazi. That's the latest in 20 briefings and hearings that we've participated in, 10,000 pages of documents we've provided. But here's the question, David. The president is not done with Benghazi because here's why. He's demanded of us since that night to find out exactly what happened and then to make every reform needed to ensure it does not happen again. The President of the United States sends these diplomats, our military, overseas to these tough spots. He's not going to send them and have them be exposed. And he's made darn certain that we're doing everything we can to ensure this doesn't happen again.
Let's talk about the spending fight, because the reality is that the debt is a huge issue that the president faces. This is the fact about it. When he came into office, the debt was at $10.6 trillion. The debt today is $16.5 trillion. We need to separate the debt from when we talk about the deficit. Automatic spending cuts happen in a couple of weeks. It was very interesting. Speaker Boehner said to a group of us before the President's State of the Union address, the President simply doesn't have the guts to take on spending, doesn't have the courage to take on liberals in his own party. It's gotten that bad.
You know, you talk about what the president found when he came to office. What's happened since then? 35 straight months of job growth, 6.1 million new private sector jobs. We're seeing the housing market starting to heal. We're seeing the stock market come back, and we're seeing consumer confidence strengthen. Those are exactly the kinds of things we should be focused on. So this isn't a spending fight for us. This is a fight about whether we're going to make the investments in middle-class families in this country, in education, in science and technology, in food inspections, and those
If
kinds
the
of things.
housing market was starting to heal,
of doing.
why doesn't
You talk
Fannie
about
Mae and Freddie
the
Mac
economy
pay
and
back
jobs.
the
There's
$200
obviously
billion
debate about how many
from the
jobs have actually
TARP
been
fund?
created in the economy. I mean, look, you pointed
If
out
the
that
housing
Apple
market
CEO,
was starting to
Tim
heal, why
Cook
don't they
was there
give
in
us
the
back
audience
the
of State of the
$200
Union.
billion?
He's sitting on over $100 million in
If
cash.
the Wall
$170
Street
million
stock
in cash at
markets
Apple.
were
Why?
starting to
Because
heal,
there's uncertainty
how come
in the
we have to
marketplace.
print
Tom Friedman
$1.2
writing this
trillion
morning on something
a
that caught my
year
eye, he
in
said,
order to
you
prop
can feel
it
the
up?
economy wants to launch, but
You're
Washington
lying
is sitting
to
on
me.
the national mood button. We as the people
You,
feel
sir,
like
are
children
lying
are
to
divorcing
me.
parents. How does this sequester business end? The president said during the campaign, the sequester, that's the word for automatic spending cuts, he said it would not happen. Is it going to happen?
I always read Tom Friedman. He's got that good Minnesota sensibility. The
You guys
column
stick
today,
together.
we do. The column today, I think, is a continuation of that. And frankly,
Don't let
I
them
believe it's a continuation of
Intercostals wrap
exactly the
around
plan
that
the president
carotid
laid out
and
in
jack
detail
that
in the State of the
jaw.
Union on Tuesday night. We've already made $2.5 trillion in deficit reduction, debt reduction efforts. We're ready, as the president said, in a very detailed way, to make another $1.5 trillion, provided we can work with our friends in Congress. How are we going to do that? One, through the lens of how we can invest in middle-class families. Two, we're going to have to work together. And three, that's why the president, in the plan he laid out, David, was very clear that he'll take on some things that are not popular.
All right, well, let me get to that in a second.
We want to ask the Republicans to do this.
Is a sequester going to happen?
Well, I sure hope it doesn't, because when you think about the...
Wait. The president said during the campaign, it's not going to happen. I mean, there's no uncertainty there.
And that's exactly why he laid out a very reasonable plan to ensure that it doesn't.
Right, but Republicans say we're done with revenue, and yet the president is saying we need more revenue. Senate Democrats had a plan this week where they're calling for new tax hikes and whatnot, as well as some spending cuts. How do we get from there to here? Boehner says, I'm not going to negotiate with the White House anymore. Let the White House and Senate Democrats come to us with a plan. So is the president going to have to get involved in the final hours like before?
Well, the president is not only has been involved right from the beginning on this. And the question isn't whether we're going to insist on some position because that's the ideologically right position. We're going to insist on doing this in a balanced way. Why does it have to be balanced? Because that's the way we're going to ensure that economic growth continues. Job creation like that we've seen over these last 35 months continues. That's why it doesn't make sense for us to take a meat cleaver to the kinds of investments that will happen if the sequester comes. Rather, we should do this in a very reasonable and balanced way. We've done it over the course of the last year.
Will he do something to stop this from happening, the automatic cuts from happening?
He will continue to make very reasonable and balanced proposals, as he has time and time again, David. And we look forward to working with our Republican friends and colleagues in the House and Senate to ensure that it doesn't happen.
So here's the reality about Medicare. You talked about some tough choices that have to be made. If you're an average earning couple, you make about $44,000 a year, and say you retired in 2010. These are facts that I think a lot of people don't know about. You paid in $122,000 in Medicare taxes, but you're drawing almost $400,000 in benefits received. This is why Medicare is going broke, and that ratio is only getting worse. And yet the president seems to be saying, well, let's make modest reforms when it comes to entitlement programs like Medicare. Simpson and Bowles say, no, you got to do a lot more than that. Republicans, Speaker Boehner saying, we got to raise the retirement age. We got to means test this. We have to find a way to change CPI, find a way to gradually decrease benefits. Why is the president not prepared to do those things today to get a deal to avoid the sequester and to take on Medicare's solvency?
The president has laid out a plan that does exactly that. But the question that the issue that is driving long-term debt, no question about it, is rising healthcare costs. That's why the president did the Affordable Care Act, and we're seeing the impact of that now. And the president laid out in very, very concise detail on Tuesday night to the Senate and to the country exactly what he's willing to do on Medicare. The fact is, David, you just mentioned Simpson Bowles. We get the same amount of savings early in the next decade from our Medicare reforms as Simpson and Bowles do in their plan. Do we do it exactly the same way? No, but we get the exact amount of savings in Medicare as they do. We've also made clear to the Speaker...
Should it be raised? Does it have to be on the table?
The question with the retirement age is, that's not a cost reducer. That's a cost shifter. What it does is it takes these exploding healthcare costs and does not reduce them, but rather shifts them to our seniors. We're not going to do that. But what we are going to do is the kinds of common sense reforms the President laid out. Reducing the kind of subsidies to prescription drug companies, making sure that wealthier seniors do more for their part. And we'll continue to do those things, and that's exactly the plan the President laid out. And I hope that the Speaker and others will come to the table with similar common sense approaches so that we can do this in a way that helps middle-class families in this country.
There's news this morning about immigration. The President wants comprehensive immigration reform. There's a bipartisan group working on just that. The USA Today has a story, a leaked story about a draft, and I'll put it up on the screen. White House immigration bill offers a path to residency. A draft of a White House immigration proposal obtained by USA Today would allow illegal immigrants to become legal permanent residents within 8 years. The bill is being developed as members of both chambers of Congress are drafting their own immigration bills. It goes on to say Senator Rubio is key in this. Said Obama's bill repeats the failures of past legislation would be dead on arrival in Congress. Has the president concluded it's time for him to drive this reform? And would that not kill what's being already put together on Capitol Hill?
On the contrary, the president, I think you saw Congressman Ryan and many others commented, even President Bush's former speechwriter commented very favorably about the president's speech on Tuesday night. The approach we're taking to immigration reform. Let's strengthen our borders. Let's enforce this on companies who are gaming the system. Let's make sure there's an earned path to citizenship, provided people who earn it learn English, pay their back taxes, have a criminal background check. And then let's make sure that the legal immigration system is reasonable, as a reasonable opportunity for people so that they don't get kicked out of the system by others. We're going to continue to do that. The fact of this report, David, I think all it says to me is that we are doing exactly what we said we'd do, which is we'll be prepared in the event that the bipartisan talks going on the Hill, which, by the way, we're very aggressively supporting. If those do not work out, then we'll have an option that we'll be ready to put out there, as the president said in Las Vegas.
Would the president support something that is more conservative, more stringent than his principles? Would he support it with the overall goal of getting a comprehensive bill?
Well, I'm not going to say what we will or won't support in the abstract. You heard our 4 principles. We want to continue building on the great strides we've made on border security. We want to make sure that we're cracking down on businesses that game the system. We want there to be an earned path to citizenship, and we also want the legal system, which frankly is too cumbersome and too broken. We want that to be reformed as well, and we're going to continue to push exactly that.
We're going to talk to Captain Mark Kelly coming up, of course, husband of Gabby Giffords, on gun control. When the president said that Gabby Giffords deserves a vote, was that not a recognition that when it comes to an assault weapons ban or a magazine ban, that politically that may be out of reach, but he'd at least like to see the vote?
No, it's a recognition that the president has put out there, with the vice president's help, a very comprehensive and common sense agenda on gun reform. That includes things like the issues you addressed. It also includes universal background checks, investments to make our schools safer, and then investments in mental health. So we're going to approach on all these things. But you're absolutely right. Congress should vote on each of these proposals. Whether the votes are there is going to be something that we'll see, but we're not going to wait and see. We're out there working this very aggressively across the country, the president and the vice president himself.
Before you go, I know you've been a religious advisor of sorts to this president. You're a devout Catholic as the Pope is preparing to abdicate. What's your analysis on what the church needs in his successor?
Well, I'm not going to kind of get into church politics or gaming that, but what I do know is that the church has been universally, but also here in the United States, a critical part of this society, a critical part of our education system that has helped so many people, and helped me, frankly. And so I think that as long as the church continues doing exactly what it's done over the course of these many years by advocating the kinds of things, investments in people, and an opportunity in education, for example, then I think we're going to be just fine.
Big question for you. Have you stopped biking to work now that you're chief of staff?
I have stopped biking to work.
That was the president's order.
That is.
You gotta listen to the boss.
Absolutely.
Dennis McDonough, thanks very much.
Thanks so much.
Glad to have you here.
I'm glad to be here. Thanks very much.
Up next on this program, the man leading the charge against Hagel's confirmation as Secretary of Defense, former friend and Republican colleague turned foe now, Senator John McCain. Try to get some straight talk on what's ahead for Hagel. Plus, our roundtable looks at what's at stake in the Hagel fight and the Obama agenda, as we've been discussing here, as the president squares off against an internally divided GOP. We'll hear from Republican strategist Alex Castellanos, the former head of HP, Carly Fiorina, MSNBC's Chris Matthews, and the Lieutenant Governor of California turned newly published author Gavin Newsom. It's all coming up next.
Meet the Press is brought to you by Xerox. With Xerox, you're ready for real business.
When I say Xerox, I know what you're thinking. Transit fares, as in the 37 billion transit fares we help collect each year. No. Oh, right. You're thinking of the 1.6 million daily customer care interactions Xerox handles, or the 900 million health insurance claims we process. So it's no surprise to you that companies depend on today's Xerox for services that simplify how work gets done, which is pretty much what we've always stood for. With Xerox, you're ready for real business.
You guys are good to go? Let me just get this out here. Unlike some places, we don't just change your oil. Our oil offer comes with a 4-tire rotation and a 27-point inspection. And everything looked great.
Actually, could you leave those in?
Sure. Want me to run them through the car wash for you too? No, I can't.
Chevy Certified Service. Get a 5-quart oil change, tire rotation, and a 27-point inspection for $29.95 or less after mail-in rebate.
President Obama issued an emotional plea during his State of the Union this week for Congress to act on new gun control legislation.
Gabby Giffords deserves a vote. The families of Newtown deserve a vote. The families of Aurora deserve a vote. The families of Oak Creek and Tucson and Blacksburg and the countless other communities ripped open by gun violence, they deserve a simple vote.
Will they get that vote? For Mark Kelly, the husband of former Congresswoman Gabby Giffords, it's personal. He joins me live, coming up here.
From our nation's networks to our city streets to skies around the world, Northrop Grumman Security Solutions are invisibly at work protecting people's lives without their even knowing it. That's the value of performance. Northrop Grumman.
It's hard to imagine my life before her, or a day without her. So much of what I take for granted simply wouldn't exist. She is the force that holds our life together. She is my everything. The center of my universe. From Forevermark. The diamond, the promise. Find an authorized jeweler at forevermark.com.
Where is the story called Your Life headed? Northern Trust goals-driven investing can help you get to the next chapter. Aligning your assets and risk preferences with each of your goals for a fully customized approach. with careful attention paid to the effects of taxes, expenses, and inflation. You have goals. We help make sure they're on the same page as your investments. Expertise matters. Find it at Northern Trust.
We are back. Talk to Senator McCain in just a moment. I want to begin with our roundtable. Joining me here, Republican strategist Alex Castellanos, Lieutenant Governor of California and the author of the new book Citizen Bill, Gavin Newsom, former chair and CEO of Hewlett-Packard, Carly Fiorina, and our own MSNBC's Chris Matthews. Welcome to all of you. Chris, let me start with you. You heard from Dennis McDonough on Hagel. He says he's not going to be a weaker Secretary of Defense when all of this is done. How does this play out, and what is the lasting effect?
Well, he's going to have to prove himself. He's certainly starting with a lot of criticism, and it looks like he'll start with most of the Republicans voting against him, maybe a few for him at the end. But, you know, he's going to have to prove himself. He has not been a strong nominee in his performance. There are questions about him which are legitimate, but I think he may benefit from the fact that I think that Senator Cruz went overboard this past week with those innuendos and things like that, guilt by associations. I think the Senate will react to that. The Senate has a lot of pride in the institution. You heard it from Senator McCain, you heard it from Senator Graham. It's almost like we're looking back on advice and consent again. There's certain rules of decorum. Tremendous pride in that institution. I think he will have to be, he may benefit from that. That's, in other words, ironically, tough treatment may help him.
Alex Castellanos, how do you see it?
I think a lot of Republicans who were initially only concerned that, Senator Hagel had such a change of heart over the years on policy and moved left even to President Obama on a lot of security things. And also worried about his character. He turned on his own party, and I think quite intensely. Now we're worried about competence. If he can't handle a room full of senators, folks are very worried. How could this guy handle the Defense Department at such a trying time? He has unified the opposition against him, and this plays in Washington, but it doesn't play much outside of Washington. I think Republicans feel they've got carte blanche to obstruct here.
All right, we're going to get more from the roundtable in just a minute. Let me bring in Senator McCain. He's in Phoenix this morning. Senator, welcome back to the program. Always good to have you.
Therefore, you
Thank
have
you. So, at a time when Congress is in such low esteem, you seem to candidly offer the reason why Hagel is facing such trouble. You spoke to Fox News on Thursday, and this is what you said.
As far as Secretary of Defense is concerned.
But to be honest with you, Neil, it goes back to there's a lot of ill will towards Senator Hagel because when he was a Republican, he attacked President Bush mercilessly. At one point said he was the worst president since Herbert Hoover. Said that the surge was the worst blunder since the Vietnam War, which is nonsense. And was very anti his own party and people. People don't forget that. You can disagree, but if you're disagreeable, then people don't forget that.
So is that to say, Senator, that it's payback time for Chuck Hagel? That's what this process has amounted to?
Of course not. That is, in fact, most of those senators who will be voting weren't even in the Senate when Mr. Hagel did those things. He's a friend of mine, and that is a part of it. The major part is the Washington Post editorialized. He's to the left of President Obama. He has been taken, and by the way, last week, I believe it was, Mr. Gibbs, who I don't often agree with, said he was the most unprepared and unimpressive nominee that he'd ever seen. Certainly the most unimpressive that I've ever seen. It really is, 99% of it is to do with the positions that Senator Hagel has taken, whether it be votes against sanctions against Iran, whether it be his belief that the surge would be the worst thing since the Vietnam War, and the positions that he has taken on various issues has frankly been not only out of the mainstream, but far to the left.
You were asked about his qualifications, which is now an issue. You said he's not qualified to be Secretary of Defense. You've come a long way on this, Senator McCain. Back in 2000, you were running for president in your stomping grounds of New Hampshire. This is what you said.
Our Secretary of Defense. There's a lot of people that could do that. One of them, I think, is Senator Chuck Hagel.
What's changed?
Yeah, that was time and Chuck Hagel's positions, which has put him from the mainstream right-of-center Republican, which he was representing the state of Nebraska, to what the Washington Post has described in their editorial as to the left of President Obama. And the fact is that Chuck Hagel made statements and took votes in the United States Senate, particularly vis-a-vis Iran. His comments about Israel were atrocious, and but he will be confirmed. And let me just point out that we delayed Bolton to the point where he never got a vote. The word was no nomination without information. They tried to filibuster Justice Alito, and the worst thing that I've ever seen in my life was the crucifixion of John Tower, where they delayed for 3 months and destroyed a good and decent man. So what we were saying, it was reported out by Tuesday. They wanted to vote on Thursday.
So who are you going to replace
We had, I thought we had an agreement, just to wait a week so the
Who was
remaining
replacing
questions
him?
would be answered. But I understand the White House wanted a vote. They got a vote, and we will have a vote when we get back, and I'm confident that Senator Hagel will probably have the votes necessary to be confirmed as the Secretary of Defense. We have an obligation of advice and consent. I don't intend to give those up when other senators continue to have reasonable questions, and I mean reasonable.
But you're not a yes vote for your old friend.
No, I don't believe he is qualified, but I don't believe that we should hold up his nomination any further, because I think it's a reasonable amount of time to have questions answered, not 2 days worth.
It's striking, though, Senator, because some members are saying, look, we need more time to look at his speeches to see if he really is anti-Israel. Others are saying, no, we're going to use this moment of leverage to get more information about Benghazi, about what the president said, who he called the night of the attack, or getting some of the emails about who changed the talking points. The president said this week on the issue of Benghazi, you guys are running out of things to ask about. So let me ask you, at the end of the day here on Benghazi, if the worst thing is true, what is that truth about how the president handled this crisis?
Well, I don't know the answer to that question. I do know that there's so many answers we don't know. For example, what did the president do the night of the attack? We know he met with the Secretary of Defense and the Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff on another issue, and then never talked to them again. We know that the Secretary of State, who said she was clear, I never saw the warnings about the fact that the consulate could not withstand an attack. Why was that? We don't even still know we've had 5 different versions of who put together the talking points. We want to know why the president alleged to Mitt Romney in the debate that he had called it a terrorist attack when he hadn't, and in an interview that very night of September 12th, he'd said he didn't know what it was, and for 2 weeks later kept saying he didn't know what kind of attack it was. And in testimony, the Secretary of Defense and Chief of Staff, the Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff both said they knew that night. There's so many questions about Benghazi. We've had 2 movies about getting bin Laden, and we don't even know who the people were who were evacuated from the consulate the next day after the attack. So there are many, many questions, and we have had a massive cover-up on the part of
But a massive cover-up of what? I mean, Susan Rice said there was a lot of confusion.
Do you care, David?
I'm asking you, Senator, what is the cover-up of
I'm
what?
asking you, do you care? I'm asking you, do you care whether 4 Americans died? Or the reasons for that? And shouldn't people be held accountable for the fact that 4 Americans died?
You said there's a cover-up. A cover-up of what? I'm just asking you, a cover-up of what?
Of the information concerning the deaths of 4 brave Americans. The information has not been forthcoming. You can obviously believe that it has. I know that it hasn't, and I'll be glad to send you a list of the questions that have not been answered, including what did the president do and who did he talk to the night of the attack on Benghazi, and why was it? Why was it that the people who were evacuated from the consulate the next day were not interviewed the next day, and then they would have known that it was not a spontaneous demonstration? Why did the president for 2 weeks during the heat of a campaign continue to say he didn't know whether it was a terrorist attack or not. Is it because it interfered with the line of Al-Qaeda is decimated and everything's fine in that part of the world? Maybe. We don't know, but we need the answers. Then we'll reach conclusions. But we have not received the answers, and that's a fact.
Senator, just a couple of quick areas before I let you go. On the sequester, you have said last week that the Republicans should be open to additional tax revenues. Is that what it's going to take here to avoid these massive cuts?
I said that I would be glad to close some loopholes about these kinds of subsidies that are outrageous and disgraceful. And I have said that it's time for the president, who said sequester won't happen, maybe sit down with some Republicans and talk to them about this issue so that maybe we can get it resolved. I didn't say sequester won't happen. I went around the country warning about what would happen with sequester. Now we have the Army Chief of Staff who's saying he can't send replacements to Afghanistan because he can't train them well enough to serve. Republicans deserve blame. I'll take some blame for it. But the President of the United States is supposed to lead. Why doesn't he call people over and we sit down and prevent the sequestration from happening rather than and fulfill the comment that he made during the campaign that sequester, quote, won't happen?
The president obviously has some thoughts about immigration reform, which he's drafted and gotten his agencies to comment on. If the president proposes legislation, do you think it will fail?
Of course it will. And that's why we are working together, Republicans and Democrats. By the way, he's had no communications with Republicans on the issue, unlike the previous 4 presidents that I have dealt with. And I believe we are making progress on a bipartisan basis. I believe we can come up with a product. Leaks don't happen in Washington by accident. This raises the question that many of us
if he really
continue to wonder about.
have concern about immigration,
Or
he
does he
would
want
have
another
some kind of
cudgel to beat up
communications with the
Republicans so that he
legislative
can get
branch.
political advantage in the next election?
Finally,
I doubt he
Senator,
really
we're
is
going to talk to
concerned
Mark
about
Kelly in just a moment.
immigration.
Gabby Giffords'
It's
husband.
just
of
more
course.
lip
Are you
service
prepared at
while
least
he
to
does the
support
things
universal
that he
background
wants to
checks? If
do.
that's all that comes out of this, would you be prepared to support that?
There is some senators, bipartisan again, Senator Coburn and Senator Manchin and some others who are working on a package that I think that most of us will be able to support. I applaud their efforts, and obviously we want to do everything we can to prevent guns from falling into the hands of people who are mentally unbalanced or criminals.
All right, Senator, I know it was your mom's birthday. Roberta turned 101 years old. God bless her. You come from good and feisty genes, and we saw it here this morning. We thank you as always.
Thank you again, David.
Okay. We are back now with our roundtable. Lieutenant Governor Newsom, welcome. Good to have you. So from Hagel to the Obama agenda, reaction to what you heard.
You know, I think Senator McCain, I have extraordinary respect for, summed up the dysfunction of Washington. You asked the question about if he led the President of the United States on immigration, would that be acceptable? Congress said absolutely not. In the previous statement, he said he needs to lead in terms of dealing with the issue of sequestration. You've got to have 2 parties in a negotiation and a willingness for both parties to reach agreement. And I think that's self-evident that the President recognizes working with this Congress is difficult. That said, look, the idea that Hagel is not qualified is rather offensive. You noted the 2000 speech of Senator McCain, but in 2006, the same Senator McCain said he was qualified to be Secretary of State. He disagrees with him, and it does seem to me more and more a personal grudge match. He did not get the support in his 2008 campaign of his friend Senator Hagel. He went on a trip during that campaign with Senator Obama, and so it just reinforces the disconnect between what's happening here in Washington, D.C. and the rest of the world.
You know, you've also got, Carly Fiorina, the fact that the president is up against a Republican Party with a lot of different divisions here. You know, Senator McCain took on Senator Cruz this week for some of how he went after Hagel. And here's what Harry Reid said, the majority leader in the Senate, about this whole filibuster process.
I guess to be able to run for the Senate as a Republican in most places of the country, you need to have a resume that says, I helped filibuster one of the president's nominees.
What about it?
Well, look, first, I have to respectfully disagree with the Lieutenant Governor because he left out a couple key facts. Key fact number 1, the sequester was created by the Obama administration. So people are frustrated because you have a set of politicians who, on both sides, who are unwilling to deal with something that they created because it was a way for them to kick the can down the road. Secondly, with regard to the Hagel nomination, unfortunately, Chuck Hagel is dealing with his own poor performance as a nominee now. All the way back to your original question. There are many people in the Democratic Party who don't agree either. There are many people in the Democratic Party who are in disagreement right now on what to do about gun control legislation. On the issue of immigration specifically, I think the reason John McCain answered the way he did is because 8 senators, 4 Democrats and 4 Republicans, have come together and put together a delicately balanced compromise. That will pass. What will fail is if either the right in Congress or President Obama in the White House try and push it too far one way or another to win points, then it's going to come crashing down. That's, I think, what John McCain meant.
Chris, how does the president deal with the Republican Party he's now dealing with?
You know, I don't know, because I think a lot of everything here makes sense, what we're talking about, because we're being reasonable here, because we want to have an immigration bill. I think that's everybody wants one in this country. We know we've had 11 million people come in the country illegally. We know we'd like something to be done compassionately toward them. We're not going to throw them out. That's ridiculous. And yet we want to stop illegal immigration. So is business really on board here to stop illegal immigration? Are the Democrats really on board to stop illegal immigration? Are the Republicans? I think they've got together. Republicans are very good at teeth. They're very good at being a tough guy. And Democrats are very good at being the good cop. They can work together. The Democrats can do the path to citizenship and the Republicans can do the enforcement. And they can agree we're going to put this together, because if we don't, they may pass a bill, a joke, like Simpson-Mazzoli. But the ideal is to pass a good immigration law, not just a reform. Something that actually works, where people actually come into the border on a regular basis, either short-term or long-term, because they come here to work, and our government controls that, because every government should control its own border. And we don't have that today. And I don't hear either side saying this is comprehensive. I love that word, comprehensive. And I think it takes both parties to do it.
Alex, the question of whether Democrats want the issue on immigration, the reality is Democrats do want the success. I mean, if you look at what the president's doing, how he's appealing to various groups in his coalition, he wants to lock these folks in. This is a president thinking about the long-term prospects of the Democratic Party, and he also knows Republicans need a deal on this.
Well, I think he's maybe thinking about the long term, but he's also thinking about 2 years from now and taking the House and going back to the first 2 years of his administration when he could run the table and push through anything he wants. It's his last shot at legacy. So keeping Republicans polarized on immigration is not bad political strategy for him. What I think you're going to see Republicans do, though, is look, federal government's job is to enforce the border, but we've got to move somewhere else. You know, talk radio has already given Republicans a little room to move on immigration. But if right now immigrants have no economic value in the American system, they have political value to Democrats. If you let governors and states and municipalities compete for immigrants, if they have a larger voice and say, hey, we need some hardworking people here in the state to grow our food, take care of our kids, we need some white college graduates to stay, and you let Arizona compete against Mississippi, business won't go to Arizona. They'll go to where the workers are, where the brains are.
Domestic difficulties
States, I think you're going to see a more bottom-up approach, I hope, from both parties. And once we get there, then I think we'll begin to address it.
When we secure the borders, we'll have an immigration policy.
One of the things that I heard from the president on State of the Union night, and I want to get the soundbite ready where he talks about government, is essentially he's saying to Republicans, look, I not only won re-election, but I'm winning.
You wanted to really show some concern over immigration.
I'm not just going to obsess
you
about
double the amount of
people
that can be naturalized every year.
It is
and
not
you cut
a
the
bigger
expense in
government,
half.
but a smarter government that sets priorities and invests in broad-based growth.
Sit there and give me lip service about border security.
That's what we should be looking for.
Lip service
because
about
he said, Carly,
how you're going to have amnesty. You're going to have more lip service about this and more lip service about that.
Everyone can agree with it. The question is,
you wanted to show
what
some
do we do
concern
about
over immigration. You
Here's the
double the
problem.
amount
the
of
government
people
has a
that
bigger
be
role than Republicans
naturalized,
acknowledge in
and
actually
you cut
sparking
the
economic growth.
expense
That's
in
the
half.
argument.
Yes, that is the argument. It is also a fact that when debt and deficit continue to grow, government has less and less room to invest. That's why you're having so much trouble dealing with the sequester, which just factually is $110 billion a year, which is 0.3% of our annual federal spending. And yet people are consumed with angst about where to cut because
But how
so
can you
much
say the
of our
government's crowding out when we have 2% interest rates right now? We could be doing really good infrastructure.
Break
People
in
buy cars and interest rates are down. When you buy a house and interest rates are down. It's a good time for public investment, and we should do it.
I don't even disagree with that.
It's not crowding
but this economy is growing at 2% or less. In other words, the American economy is not performing to its full potential. We should be growing at 3 to 4%. We should be creating more jobs. We shouldn't have 7.8% unemployment.
All of this just strikes.
You're going to tell me this economy's growing at 2%?
We have leaders that are not leading.
They've been lying and adjusting the economy figures for 4 years.
But it's depressing.
Our economy has
been
contracting by 1 to 3% for 4 consecutive years.
Of the world we're living in, sequestration is almost certain.
We've been in a depression since 2008.
And by the way,
Politician made Cliff.
and remember, this was not Obama coming out with sequestration. This was Obama being forced into a corner.
Yeah, the economy figures going, oh, it's a double-dip recession.
And this
we
was
never did
to that in order
climb
to
out of the first recession. And the first recession fell into a technical depression.
Higher level of expectation.
The government figures are a lie, and you're going to perpetuate the lie by telling me that we have 2% growth.
I think Republicans have been shocked.
We don't have 2% growth. We've been experiencing -1 and -3%
The one
growth
thing I think in a time
for
we're
the
looking
past
for
4 years.
consensus,
And that's
the
a
left and right
depression.
agreed this president gave 2 very left of center liberal speeches. You know, we've all been wondering what Washington was going to do with all this extra money they have lying around. Well, the president explained it. He's going to spend it on growing government. His contention in both those speeches was that, as you just said, government has not been doing enough. It needs to be more. That is not the Republican view. That's a declaration of war on the Republican view. That's not there is no middle ground where Republicans and Democrats can get together on those two.
To that point, Chris, look, the president said, I'm not going to spend a dime to absolute deficit, but what he's talking about does not make the deficit go down either.
I think we're all agreeing here. The president's priority now is growth, not debt reduction.
And none of your lip service takes into effect the new social technology.
It's job creation, economic
I think he's got another priority, and I don't think it's growth. I think this president's priority is social justice. I think he sees himself as an inheritor of Lincoln and Martin Luther King, and
we have lost the long war
this president
also.
wants to flatten the American economy. He wants those people at the top.
The best we can do at home is protect our constitutional
social justice.
protocol.
And I think that's who. And by the way, that's a noble
Where's he
cause.
this weekend? Playing golf with 3 big businessmen.
The best way to do that
there is a point
is let the people keep the money.
But here's a political question, which is, does the president, Boehner this week before the State of the Union said, look, I'm not negotiating with him anymore. We're not going after any grand bargain here. And Friedman suggests this in the New York Times column this morning,
one of the things we could do to not make other people around the world upset is send some Superman intercontinental ballistic missile armed with a nuclear warhead on one of our cities is invite their brothers and sisters to come live here.
I mean, he hasn't been able to work with this Congress the last few years. I don't have any great expectations, particularly with 2014 on the horizon. We've had already the agenda hijacked by the reality of 2014 and the sharp elbows of the Tea Party and folks like Cruz and others that are holding the line. I mean, talk about this notion of cruise control and poor Cornyn there. Number 2, Republicans completely mesmerized by his inability or incapacity to move his own agenda because of his concern about being primary. So the president's right to go around. It's sad, but true, around Congress. He did it on the payroll tax debate and won. He did it as it relates to student loan rates and won. And he certainly did it with the Bush tax cuts. And to the extent he can, he has a populist agenda supported by the vast majority of the American people, and now he has something to go out and campaign on and ultimately principled policies to hopefully govern on.
What is it? I want to go back, Chris, to say you were very tough on Ted Cruz this week, as were some Democrats who said this was McCarthyism.
And so
it's that echoes of McCarthy and innuendo.
Lindsey Graham, and so was John McCain, not on this program, but this week. It's about tactics. Let's take it back. I don't know the man's personality. I know he's got an interesting background. He's a brilliant guy in many ways. But the tactics, I watched him in those hearings, and I saw Joe McCarthy. I saw the way he was prosecuting the case, the way he was putting up evidence, innuendo, guilt by association. If some spokesperson, some flack for the Ministry of Foreign Affairs in Tehran says he thinks we can do business with this guy more than somebody else, some hawkish neocon, is that an indictment against him? But he turned it into an indictment.
David,
I think it's really being unfair, and I think the Senate is going to circle the wagons and say this guy's going to...
All right, quick response, Carl.
I have to just say, talking about leadership, this is a president who is not afraid to use his power. He is not afraid to issue executive orders when he sees fit. I find it stunning, truly, that this president and the Democratic Party continues to lay all the blame for their failure to achieve anything at the feet of the Tea Party or Ted Cruz or whoever the latest villain is. The truth is, this man is the President of the United States. He could get immigration reform, as one example, tomorrow. If he would step forward and say, I applaud and salute the Gang of Eights proposal. Let's go forward and vote on that.
He essentially did that in the State of the Union. Let me make
That's not true, by the way. Under our Constitution, you can use now 60 votes to stop. You can require 60 votes to Senate, which is basically forcing the majority to give up its word.
Let me get out of here because
it's really become an undemocratic system with the way that Boehner's had to play this because of his right way.
It's all the Republicans' fault, in your view, clearly.
All right, let me leave it there because I got to get a break in. Citizensville, by the way, Gavin, your book talks a lot about how local government can be more effective, say, than the national. And it's a very interesting read. Thank you all very much. When we come back here as NBC News' week-long look at gun violence continues, we're calling it Flashpoint Guns in America. I'm going to be back with a live and new interview with a leading voice in this debate, retired Space Shuttle commander and husband of former Congresswoman Gabby Giffords, Mark Kelly. And of course, we're going to take full advantage of the captain being here as well. He's got experience as an astronaut. I want to ask him about that unexpected cosmic moment captured on tape for the whole world to witness. What was that? And is more coming? More Meet the Press after this.
I've seen incredible things, otherworldly things, but there are some things I've never seen before. This GE jet engine can understand 5,000 data samples per second, which is good for business, because planes use less fuel, spend less time on the ground, and more time in the air. Suddenly, faraway places don't seem so far away. I'm Lorenzo. I work for 47 different companies. Well, technically, I work for one. That company, the United States Postal Service, works with thousands of home businesses. Because at USPS.com, you can pay, print, and have your packages picked up for free. I can even drop off free boxes. I wear a lot of hats. Well, technically, I wear one. The U.S. Postal Service. No business too small.
Weather conditions aren't nearly as nice as where we came from, but the wind chill is down below. Flight attendants prepare for
We have record lows out there, so bundle up and thank you for flying with us.
Now with my Buick Remote Start, the new Buick Enclave makes sure you're ready for anything. Just one more way, the new Enclave is smart, made beautiful.
You know what's impressive? A talking car. But I'll tell you what impresses me. A talking train. This GE locomotive can tell you exactly where it is, what it's carrying, while using less fuel. Delivering whatever the world needs, when it needs it. After all, what's the point of talking if you don't have something important to say?
I love a discovery. If I see something on the web, on the air, in life, bam. Ordinary Americans, exceptional Americans, these are the stories I'm interested in.
About
10 o'clock Friday night, when you do a story that never
Ballistic missiles with STEP Technologies, each one of them toting a half a megaton bomb will be hurting.
The new Quail West. Let's get acquainted.
Land O'Lakes Saute Express is the all-new saute starter that's one step, no prep, and so good they'll last for more. Land O'Lakes Saute Express. Find it in the dairy aisle.
Pass that hat to Pink to George Washington. JeffandJeff.com.
The new Quail West. Let's get acquainted. When you need to know, count on NBC2 first.
We are back. Joining me now, Mark Kelly, husband of former Congresswoman Gabby Giffords, and now the co-founder of Americans for Responsible Solutions. Captain Kelly, it's good to finally have you here. We've been trying, and we finally got you on Meet the Press. Welcome.
Thank you, David.
This was an emotional moment this week during the State of the Union address. I've covered a bunch of them, and you don't often see the kind of energy and emotion around the issue of guns as we now see them. This was the moment. The president was talking about the violence in Chicago and other victims around the country as he called for a vote. This is what he said.
Idea's parents, Nate and Cleo, are in this chamber tonight, along with more than 24 Americans whose lives have been torn apart by gun violence. They deserve a vote. They deserve a vote. They deserve a vote. Gabby Giffords deserves a vote. The families of Newtown deserve a vote. The families of Aurora.
Talk about that moment. Gabby obviously has been back in the chamber on numerous occasions, but this was emotional.
It was certainly the point in his speech where there was the most energy in the chamber. I mean, not only from the gallery, but the floor as well. And I think that resonates throughout the country. I think people are demanding that something be done about this gun violence. I mean, we can't continue and do nothing when we have 21st graders die in their classrooms.
You have an incredible amount of momentum. I mean, if Mike Bloomberg, Mayor Bloomberg often says, if Gabby Giffords getting shot doesn't do it, if Aurora doesn't do it, then the children being massacred in Newtown, then nothing is going to cause the needle to move. And yet, you're getting well acquainted with the tough politics on this issue, even on the Democratic side. You've got Democrats up for re-election in red states next year who aren't about to vote for an assault weapons ban or a magazine ban. So what's possible at the end of the day?
Well, it is a tough issue, but if you heard Senator McCain, who was on earlier, I mean, he talked about universal background checks and about how a bill, that he could potentially support. So there is momentum. I mean, it's really clear that we need to do something and pass a universal background check. Since 1999, 1.7 million criminals have failed the background check. Now, the problem is they can now go down the street and buy a gun from a gun show, at a gun show. And that's what's called the gun show loophole. We need to close that loophole. And Americans are demanding that we do something.
You've got a dynamic that is changing. With your group, you're raising private money. You're putting ads on the air like what debuted this week with you and Gabby talking about the issue, highlighting the emotional pain and the sacrifice. But also, as she says in the ad, that it's time for action. It's time to do something. You're up against groups like the National Rifle Association. What is your group and others prepared to do politically to tip the scales?
Yeah, so, the NRA has been the dominant force on this issue for over 30 years. We're willing, what we're going to do is we're going to support people running for office, and we're going to oppose others that are unwilling to do something on this issue. I mean, we're going to spend money in these races. And, we are committed to making sure that we have safer schools and safer communities. And the first thing we can do, the thing we can do right now, is to pass a universal criminal background check bill.
But you hear the NRA say, look, this is going to be a lot of legal gun owners who are now on a registry that the federal government keeps track of. This is an anti-government issue. This is a fear of government overstepping its bounds. For a lot of people, it goes beyond guns.
Well, that's the point that they try to make. But there is no gun registry. I mean, nobody is proposing a gun registry. What we're proposing that happens is, I just bought a gun in October. And I went through a very simple 5-minute background check. I'm sure sometime, Mr. LaPierre went through a background check before buying a gun too. Now, shouldn't criminals and the mentally ill be subject to a background check? I mean, shouldn't they? I mean, it's hard for me to understand why there's an organization like the NRA that is currently making it easier for criminals and the mentally ill to have access to a firearm. That doesn't make any sense.
Vogue magazine has a piece on you and Gabby, and there's a poignant picture of it that's part of that piece that we can put on the air. Is she up to this, to be the face of gun control measures? How is she able to function just in life, to say nothing of the rigors of being a political figure on this issue?
With a lot of things, she struggles every single day. I mean, she suffered a horrific injury 2 years ago. But she's got a lot of energy, maybe not as much energy as before. She's in a good mood, but she is committed to doing something. I mean, like me, Gabby sees that we can't go with the status quo when we have 21st graders die in their classrooms. So she is up to doing this, and we realize that this isn't gonna, there are some things we can do immediately, like pass a universal background check. Other things might take a little bit longer, and she's committed to doing this.
I told you I couldn't have you here without asking you about the big news this week, the images over Russia of this meteor. And all of that energy being released, and you had about 1,000 people injured. As people looked at this image of this streaking across the sky, to say nothing of the asteroid that came within 17,000 miles of the United States, or rather of Earth. This is scary stuff, but you've seen it before.
Well, it's a big rock, obviously. I think that was the size of the school bus.
Yeah.
So that's a pretty big object, and fortunately it didn't land in the middle of a town in Russia. A lot of people were injured. But there certainly is a risk out there. The universe is a very crowded place. We have stuff entering the atmosphere all the time. It's interesting when you're on the space station and you're looking at those shooting stars, meteorites entering the atmosphere, you see those beneath you.
Wow.
So it's a little bit disconcerting because they're all flying by you.
Mark Kelly, great to have you here. Thank you very much. We'll obviously keep track of what you're up to.
Thank you.
We'll take another break here. Be back in just a moment.
We know why we're here. To connect our forces to what they need when they need it.
To help troops see danger before it sees them.
To answer the call of the brave and bring them safely home.
Around the globe, the people of Bowie are working together to support and protect all who serve.
That's why we're here.
Seems like ETFs are everywhere these days. But there is one source with a wealth of ETF knowledge all in one place. Introducing Schwab ETF OneSource. It's OneSource with the most commission-free ETFs. OneSource with ETFs from leading providers. And extensive coverage of major asset classes. All brought to you by one firm with comprehensive education, tools, and personal guidance to help you find ETFs that may be right for you. Schwab ETF OneSource. For the most commission-free ETFs, you only need one source and one place. Start trading commission-free with Schwab ETF OneSource. Call, click, or visit today. Investors should carefully consider information contained in the prospectus, including investment objectives, risks, charges, and expenses. You can request the prospectus by calling Schwab at 800-435-4000. Please read the prospectus carefully before investing.
As we rebuild our economy, one industry is investing confidently in America's future: oil and natural gas. In communities across the country, we're creating jobs, investing in technology, infrastructure, people, all to produce and deliver more American energy to you. In 2011, we added up to $545 billion through capital investment, wages, and dividends to the U.S. economy. We believe in the promise of America. That's why we're investing right here at home.
Before we go this morning, our programming note, you can watch this week's Press Pass with former D.C. Public Schools Chancellor Michelle Rhee on what she would like to see President Obama do to reform the country's schools. That's at meetthepressnbc.com. That's all for today. We'll be back next week. And a happy birthday, it falls on a Sunday, to our executive producer, Betsy Fisher. If it's Sunday, it's Meet the Press.
Stations come up to Mission A for our final go. This is for real this time. Step 7.212. Verify and lock. Command is locked. 5 seconds.
3, 2, 1.
Standing by for capture.
The most innovative software on the planet
Dragon is captured.
is connecting today's leading companies to places beyond it. Siemens answers.
You are a business pro. Omnipotent of opportunity. You know how to mix business with business. And you rent from National. Because only National lets you choose any car in the aisle and go. You can even take a full size or above and still pay the mid-size price.
I can get used to this.
Yes, you could, business pro. Yes, you could. Go National. Go like a pro.
Look, every day we're using more and more energy.
The world needs more energy.
Where's it going to come from?
That's why right here in Australia,
Chevron is building one of the biggest natural gas projects in the world. Enough power for a city the size of Singapore for 50 years.
What's it going to do to the planet?
Natural gas is the cleanest conventional fuel there is.
We've got to be smart about this.
It's the smart way to go.
Want to go healthy? Don't start by lifting 400 pounds, running a marathon your first day out, or jumping on some crazy bad diet. Start small, because small changes are easier to stick with than the big ones. The more you know.
Commentary with JevinChess.com, J-I-V-E-F-F.